Good evening, this is Dr. Justina Agnieszka Chevalier. These videos, probably another two, will be about terminology or a glossary that is present, like I said, in mass media, in DSM as well, in psychiatry and psychology, and that contains words out of context of, to me, best to nowadays uh, my knowledge obtained from literature review, quite extensive one. I was for many long actually years at 38 a worker in library and at the university of research type, and with freedom to pursue also my own research. And so that is the best described in social psychology and also in quantum physics as well as in migration and movement of animals and mating ritual of animals, and in humans, well, observations of such behavior become source of many perceived as spiritual phenomena that are not spiritual, and nothing is very extraordinary in them, and are actually described in many experiments. One of those examples is, for example, a precognition. What precognition consists of? In primal pursuit of mating partner is a perception of being observed and an imprint, what is denominated as egoic supply of elation and love derived from observation of a gender in general opposite person of an observed partner, that in potential that is calculated by likes and also preferences of a person that is being watched, is considered suitable in age, attractiveness, and interests. And such brings with eyes closed or in very even remote, in distance locations when two are absent, the impression of intense love and perception of a specific presence of a specific individual that is sexual in nature, and visualization of preludes to lovemaking or lovemaking. That is normal, and it is a precognition, uh, which can only be established, which in science, for instance, in explorations of autism and dynamic of mother and daughter, when that child was available, and the term in determining, for instance, what thought content of that mother is, as precognition, the moment there is a corroboration of such in presence. What does a corroboration in presence? When does mind content becomes a precognition, as opposed to something that is perceived as love for self of an unknown origin, and sudden sense of own beauty, heightened also sensation to touch, and heightened perception of own attractiveness. And then, as that person approaches more intentionally or observes, which is described in actually quantum mechanics mostly, it is described as a perception of an specific opposite gender individual, and visions of love making in perceptions, bodily perception, impressions, as if that person was touching in such reciprocity that is usually voluntary and risky. And so that is based on that precognition, when that person appears, an assertion by aversion versus as a pursuit, because of the light and such present as the distance is diminishing of the sexual activity, becomes in that cognitive activity and corresponding to sexual and emotional state, pursuit of that person in space, because it is confirmed it is so that that person could be potentially a parent of my child. I would not want anyone else other present in that space, and it is mutual and based on that, versus a perception of being observed and sense of fear, anger of or being molested with it, and an observation that of another person that derives a sense that of perhaps aesthetical beauty, but that is not the same as a bonding in mind and then becoming in proximity closer to determine that it is such, it is a real person, and that the perception of that person is congruent with that person's physical appearance and features, voice, and or vocabulary. And that leads to then continuation of that relationship in person, and leads to physical relationship, pursuit of lovemaking in mind, now in person, to have derive the greatest pride when that is a pursuit difficult to control immediately of own by two offspring, which is completely dependent on an instinct, bonding instinct, because of intense love for one another and desire, creating such attraction, force of attraction, and rejection of all others as less attractive. And then that ideally results in pregnancy, and the termination of such movements in on an area are often accompanied by an ovulatory cycle that is aligned then between the readiness of that person in physical manifestations of sexual readiness to pursue own child, and preparation of such a physiological one in a female to actually have those persons aligned in space at the same time, and to recognize one another as the ones who in mind and in body form a continuum free of ideation of other persons' pleasurable presence as an obstacle to concentration in mind and body and pursuit of a child. Now, love for person characteristics, specific one, in self as opposed to characteristics of family member and language and vocabulary of family members and self, is often called narcissism. That narcissism is actually a internalization of love of another person and recognition in self of another opposite gender person is source of eroticism and self-eroticism, and is in fact repulsive as aloofness, coldness, or being indifferent to a pursuit of touch or intimacy, especially by persons of opposite gender, all except for that person who is deeply loved and is derived from a deep possessiveness needed for creating a bond in orgasmic pleasure to have a child, and extend that bond in mutual adoration, leading to humbleness and gratefulness that the one and the other were chosen. Uh, that is then that aloofness and rejection and aggression towards other persons, and itemization, which I called another term, pursuit of if forced of remediative sexuality, which is always less intense than that person who loves the most, and therefore in many ways in a contemptful way, always denominating the other one as sexless source of offspring, or as sexual object where limit is consists of a provision of for self of sexual gratification and non-pursuit of children of own, so demands of having no children, or such incapacitation when the opposite is happening. Love is in a way, because of presence of bonding with someone else, is contemptful, and therefore that contempt creates rejections of pregnancies in fear of that fathers especially, but it happens the same in women, in that two dynamic, would harm or kill that child. and that is derived in some of relates, actually, and in my observation, from profound hatred of the ecosystem to a child not derived from maximum natural right that is for a person of the most of an instinct to pursue well-being and no harm in pursuit of safety of a person in primal way, at the same time as feeling entitled because of having such instinct to pursuit of shared luxuries, and in self-ways way delegating these luxuries, all of these, to that person to pursue, for example, that person as a chance, a person's love to demonstrate that all the others are less. Nesting, being now manic, what does it mean? Mania, or a state of elation, an appearance that is stripped of a cloth, colorful, etc., is a state of being pursued in a female by a male in to a small or larger degree lift reciprocity of serious desire. It is sense of security because of that male's desire being bonding to that female, and perception of safety because that male will defend that woman if from all other suitors and women, uh, feeling entitled to her because of that reciprocity in desire, as well as a pursuit in energy of provision for self, of life-saving and remediative action to make sure that all the work is finished and Arya is prepared for having a child, as well as making sure that everybody likes one. So spending and paying money to persons who appear as if the future child in resemblance to that father, which many mistake with pursuit of other partners. False if those persons actually pursue to have sex, while a woman is disinhibited by sense of safety because of presence of desire of the other person, that leads to self-defense and aggression when that man is absent, in an urge to protect that sacred relationship, to pursue child and protect that relationship in an instinct, to not touch and not to be approached by other persons who do not understand the dynamic into presented in social psychology and in mating in animals, and pursue that person deriving in a unilateral way some degree of satisfaction in hopes of obtention by provision of contempt of love equal in magnitude to a person that pursued that woman in desire and love, and this is false. State of depression is a state when during a specific period of time sexual, exclusive and romantic relationship was pursued in reciprocity and fertilization was not pursued and impeded at determined by one at least volition of the other person, meaning primal rejection. A person suggested that the such was wanted in desire and in presence of love, and in certain moment decided against it, having another person as more loved than that person, or as more desired, and that brings sense of primal rejection or inherent badness in relation to one another, at least person, and sense of lost self-esteem or worth that is described as inherent badness then and sociopathy. It can be from the man or woman, it is dynamic for two and is remediable in remembrance of desire and being desired, and in hope of being pursued or in pursuing a child offspring in desire actually, or another person who provides that, which creates cyclicity that is in proportion of definite rejection because of appearance of a person who is not in possession of a rejective type of resentment and harm and pursues and loves more. And then the, for instance, psychotic disorder and hearing voices and pursuit of death of a person close to menstruation or on is proportional to impediment to pursue a child in loving relationship. And when exposure to the person who wants that happens in desire, that ceases to be an issue when it comes to homicidal ideation of a dysphoric premenstrual disorder.